Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Jackie Luqman.
And I am Abdul Shahid Luqman.
And welcome to another edition of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation.
The most dangerous show anywhere. This is going to be our short, as we like to say, Catholic version of of our broadcast tonight.
Yeah, because if you have not noticed, we have been really, really busy. We always say we're busy, but the past few weeks have been particularly brutal with the activities that we've been involved in and just kind of the emotional and the mental toll that a lot of what we've been involved in has taken on us. And we're going to talk about some of that tonight real quick. We're going to tie all of this together because everything that is going on right now, we tried to tell y'all that all this garbage was coming a while ago. How long have we been doing this?
About 5 years now.
Yep. We've been telling you what's going on, Scully, over there on YouTube. Scully says, "Good evening, Abdus, Jacqueline,
good
and
evening.
Pooch." Brewski, if you didn't notice,
Yep.
Brewski climbed up in his little spot as a assistant producer back there. So look, let's get right to it because we got to eat dinner. I'm trying not to let this chest cold get me, so I need to get some sleep.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 2 weeks of activities at our church that we
yes.
organized. We just gonna admit it. We radicalizing our church. And that I told those people if they didn't want a radical black Pan-Africanist, anti-imperialist activist as a moderator, don't elect me to the moderator position again. They did, so now they're mad. We're gonna talk about that. If you had not heard, today, our comrades who were invited to stay at the Venezuelan Embassy were arrested illegally today. That arrest was illegal. The arrest was carried out by the Secret Service. There's a whole lot of stuff that went on in the background of that we really can't talk about entirely because there's lawyers involved and we don't want to jeopardize anything that our comrades are facing. But I did a couple of live streams today, and we're going to talk about those points again, and explain to you and try to explain why the State Department, because that's who did this. It was the State Department that did this, that carried out this illegal arrest today, and we're going to tell you why they did it. And then Iran.
Iran. Yep.
Iran.
Yep.
I'm sorry, because you know I'm terrible at I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm tired.
I remember that Flock of Seagulls song. And Iran.
Now I'm not going to be able to get that stupid song out of my head. And I hate that song. Excuse me. Then you got the abortion bans in Alabama and another one in Missouri. And listen, you know what this really is? You know what all this stuff really is? It's white people going wild. That's all this is.
Yeah, and dragging the rest of us with them.
It's white people gone wild, imperialism, capitalism. Let's see, where shall we start?
Well, I want to say this. We had Jamu Baraka. We were with him. And while I was driving you guys to the to Union Station, of course, you get 3 people with a brain inside of a vehicle, and we just can't talk about nonsense or we can't talk about the morning show fluff.
We ain't talking about the Real Housewives because we don't watch that garbage.
Exactly. But what we were talking about is how actually Ajamu Baraka was the one who initiated this, and I was it kind of caught me when he said it. We're riding around, and for it was just a particularly heavy day of traffic in D.C. I know we had Cop Week, we had all these other things, but it was just getting out of Southeast was like, wow. I mean, if it was an emergency, we all would have been hit.
Yeah.
But it was hard to get out of here. D.C.'s population have increased. Now, I've been down here like 6 years. And when I first came down here, D.C. population was like 600,000. I remember that. Now it's almost 1 million.
Yeah.
So it's like 850, almost 900,000 people. And you can tell, you can see it. There's traffic everywhere, and everybody wants to drive. So while we're going to Union Station, Ajamu noticed that the buses were practically empty.
Yeah.
But yet everybody's in a car.
Right.
And not only is everybody's in the car, everybody is driving the car solo. You know how we do. You know, we just our own personal space and stuff. You know, but yet the buses are practically empty. So Jamu basically brought our attention to that, and it was like, wow, here we are talking about this window of time, which isn't a lot, 12 years, you know, according to the UN, and you know, but we don't really have a lot of time to fix this thing. Every day that goes by now, here it is May. We just went through a cold spell, which I have never experienced in the month of May.
That's why I got this stupid cough.
Right, and I mean, I was born and raised on the East Coast. I have never experienced having to wear a leather coat in May, not on this side of the country.
Right.
So so we just went through that. And so when, you know, everyone is starting to admit that, yeah, there's something wrong with the climate. I'm starting to even hear it on the radio and news programs who would stay away from that topic.
Right.
But now they can't ignore it. So now everything is like, oh, wow, climate change is now it's becoming part of the lexicon. So this is the thing. It's that in spite of all of that, what we haven't noticed that there is no sense of urgency.
Yep.
And this is what Ajamu brought up, and I agree. With all of the United Nations reports, with all of the scientists' reports and predictions on how bad this will be, or how worse it will get if we don't do anything about our habits, and because now it's proven this is human caused activity. You know, the debate is over. It's human caused activity. So with all of this, there's still no sense of urgency. And one of the things that Ajamu said that I found fascinating, it's quite true. He said that in all of this talk about climate change, right, that one of the things that was missing out of this conversation is that telling Americans, and then we could expand that to the Western world if we want to, but since we live here, telling Americans that our lifestyle is unsustainable. The way we consume, the way we live our life, the way that we waste resources, and the way that we, you know, the way that we live, which is just consumption and consumerism, and I mean, and even the way that we view ourselves in context to this world, that we don't need each other. It's this individualism, that we're not connected to what is around us, and this attitude, along with this hyper consumerism that we find ourselves in, is practically unsustainable. Our planet can't sustain this. We can't keep consuming. I mean, it's like our consumption is destroying the planet. And now you're talking about other populations like China, and because everybody wants to have it all. So you have China, then you have India. Both of them have populations of a billion people. Then you have a large population in Brazil, and this planet can't. And everybody wants to consume, and everybody wants the shiny new car. Everybody wants this, and everybody wants that. But yet our planet's resources are finite.
Yeah, I mean, and part of the conversation that I hear people have that I think is the wrong conversation is, you know, population growth. There are too many people on the earth. That's not the issue. The issue is the consumption that a small segment of the wealthy part of that population is outpacing the resources. I mean, those wealthy nations, the United States being the chief among all of them, are eating up the resources in this world faster, at a faster rate than the natural resources can be replenished. I mean, so there is we have to change the way we view I think our individual actions, yes, because people do need to take public transportation more. You know, Ajamu, it's funny, Ajamu asked us how many cars do we have, and we do have 2 cars, and we bought the second car. Both of them are used. Both of them we bought with cash, because I'm not buying a new car. I haven't bought a new car in 20 years. I'm never going to buy a new car. We bought the second car because the transmission on the first car started to slip. So we're like, okay, we can't be short without a car. So we need to, while we have the money, go ahead. But when the car that's finally on its last hind legs, hind wheels,
right.
dies, we're probably just going to stick with one car because we do have a metro right across the street. Mm-hmm. So, we're including ourselves in this conversation.
Exactly.
Yes, there are things that individual people need to do, but we also need to hold the corporations, 100 corporations mm-hmm. that are responsible for most of the actual CO2 emissions and pollution and deforestation. It's not individual people who are going over to the Amazon and tearing down the rainforest. That's corporations. That's pharmaceutical companies.
But the corporations are all consuming that amount of resources because of the lifestyle that many of us live. So I mean, so there's a what they call a supply and demand. So mm-hmm. these resources, and I'm glad that one of our viewers had just said that the U.S. military is the biggest polluter, and that's true. So I mean, so you got the U.S. military, you have all of these corporations, but these corporations are consuming the vast amount of resources because of supply and demand. So you have these two large markets that's coming on to the world stage, India and China. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and both of them want what America set the pace. Everybody is looking at America. And this is where you preachers, we'll get into that. But you got America that has set the pace for affluence.
That's true.
Right.
Yep.
So now everybody who adopted our model, because after all, socialism, doesn't make people affluent. Communism wasn't making people affluent, but everybody looks to the United States and say, "Wow, if you want a prosperous, affluent nation, they're the guys that do it."
Right.
But affluence in what?
And let's do it bigger than them.
Right. And let's do it right.
Yeah.
So let's do it bigger than them. But at the same time, no one is saying that, hey, look, there is only a certain amount of resources to go around, mm-hmm. and so and everybody can't be that type of have that type of affluence. So what happens is that they know that, mm-hmm. and so now the thing is that we say with the discussions, population control and everything else, it's say, well, we know that everybody can't be affluent. So what we're going to do is we're going to play the game, or we're going to rig the game where only a certain amount. And so this is where we get the 1%. Right. This is where we get the others, because see, all of this hoarding of wealth and stuff is basically a byproduct of people knowing that stuff is running out.
Exactly. And Julie brought up a great point. And this is my view that people's, especially wealthy people's, consumption practices are ridiculous. But it's also true that capitalists create that demand for consumption.
Right. I meant to say that it's being marketed to.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, here's a good example, mm-hmm. and it's not that I disagree with you. You're right, mm-hmm. because even wealthy people don't need all the shit they have.
Right.
But here's a good example. Like, there's this thing about how much a man should spend on an engagement ring, and I did not know for years that actually came from a marketing campaign that was started by the De Beers Diamond Company.
Right. That's right. We covered that before.
We did. There was no rule that said you had to have a diamond engagement ring. That whole you have to have a diamond engagement ring thing was something that literally some filthy rich white capitalists came up with in order for them to make more money. And they created this marketing campaign where in the United States. And they just kept throwing up these billboards, diamonds are a girl's best friend. And if you really love her, you'll spend, 2-3 months salary on a diamond ring. And then these people started doing it.
Because of the marketing. That's right.
But, I mean, so that there's a symbiotic, that's not the right word. There's a parasitic relationship between corporations and marketing and the people that they market to.
Right.
I mean, corporations have created this consumer-driven society. We know that America is a consumer-driven society. I mean, when you look at Apple, mm-hmm. look at Apple. It's not that Apple, the iPhone X is this piece of wondrous technology that you cannot live without. You can live without an iPhone X, but that's not how Apple markets that next release. You just got the 9 6 months ago.
But see, this is the thing, and this is how they do it. All of the technology that goes into the 9 and the 8 and the 7 and stuff, they had that during the 1.
Exactly.
But see,
they were just holding off on it.
Right. But they couldn't put all that technology in the 1 because, hey, you don't make no money like that. So we'll put this one part of technology in there, and then we let that go. And then the next phone, the i2. But all of this stuff was already invented. All of this stuff was already available in the iPhone 1.
And honestly, tell you the truth, Android came out with the technology before Apple did. Android systems just had terrible marketing. What Steve Jobs was brilliant at was marketing.
Of course, yes.
He made it so that his marketing campaign for Apple products was so tight that he made the American people believe they could not live without an Apple.
Exactly.
That they couldn't live without a Mac.
But then look at the whole the way that he did market it. With Steve Jobs' genius on top of the stage, and
right.
They would have this big hoopla, and all of a sudden, they come out and be like, "Oh, Steve Jobs is introducing a new product." Then he comes out and he makes this whole hoopla and be like, "Now, just to let you know, we have put this into it, and we put that into it, and now we're coming out with the Apple 6 or something
right,
something like that." But the Apple 6 wasn't, Apple 6, all that stuff in the Apple 6 was, like I said, was available in Apple 1.
Right. I mean, Apple 6 is, is basically an Apple 5 with some extra pixels in the camera. I mean, that's the reality behind these marketing blitzes for the new upgrade of cell phones and laptops and all this kind of stuff. And we have become addicted, to this consumer-driven blitzkrieg that the capitalists have created. So on an individual level, yeah, we have to break that, but also we have to challenge these corporations to stop raping the planet. So I mean, it's a one-to-one kind of thing. Well, no, not one-to-one, because they do bear more responsibility than we do because they got all the money. But I mean, that's the reality of where we are. I wish there were an easy answer. I mean, it's not as easy as just saying, everybody needs to recycle. Well, most people do recycle. But then we have to ask, well, what do the refuse companies do? What happens at the recycling companies? Are they really recycling the materials? Are they just really taking it to a landfill?
Well, yeah.
So there's all these kinds of questions that we have to ask, that we need answers, but we do have to start doing something to address the warming of our climate, because the effects will be irreversible and catastrophic in 12 years.
Yeah, I mean that's conservative. It could be sooner.
It is probably going to be sooner.
But see, one of the there is some hope on some of the horizon with climate change. For example, right now there is a mass effort to clean up the plastics in the oceans. Mm-hmm. There has been a decrease in plastics going into the ocean, and I think that comes with information. People are starting to get information and realize that, hey, I didn't know that plastic was as bad. It's sort of like the cigarette campaigns and all the other kind of stuff. But for the more major things, as far as deforestation, finding new oil reserves, which all that stuff should just be left in the ground.
We need to leave that shit in the ground. We need to get off fossil fuels.
Right, and all that stuff that they're still trying to just hold on. Finding these new oil reserves and stuff, instead of in order to combat climate change, it has to be the mobilization of nations' resources, like you're going to war.
Right. Oh yeah.
Now during wartime, let's say the last time we had a noble war, going back to World War II. Well, in World War II, there was rationing. Mm-hmm. All of the country's resources was placed on the war effort. Which means that you couldn't just eat meat when you wanted to. You just couldn't. Everybody had to sacrifice. if the United States and its allies were going to win the war against fascism, that meant that your lifestyle had to change. And so this same mentality and effort has to be used here. So that means that in order to fight climate change and to prevent it from getting worse, because scientists said that we still have a little bit of window left.
We do.
We still have a little bit of time, but it's closing rapidly. And that means that from the pulpit, everywhere, especially the religious community, the religious community got to stop thinking that this is not their fight.
Oh my God.
So, so all of this has to be mobilized, and all the research will mobilize. The politician, the political will has to be there to the point where it's like, look, we have to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. We have to put the technology that we buried long time ago, in order, hydrogen cars and all that stuff is available, but it's no political will because of the influence of the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
Well, there has to be to the point where the fossil fuel industry has to be part of history.
Yes.
We can't afford to continue to use that as an energy source anymore. As far as other forms of energy, like the sun, the biggest free energy that's out there, they're making us pay for it.
Which doesn't get less energetic if it's cloudy.
Exactly. So these are the things. But as we move on, as we move on from this, there is no sense of urgency amongst the population. And we put stories on about climate change and all of these things. It's just not that sense of urgency. I just think that that it just hasn't really penetrated. It's penetrating slowly but surely, but it hasn't penetrated to the point where we can mobilize as a society to do something about it.
Well, the problem with Americans is that we don't care about stuff until it happens to us directly, until it affects us directly, until it shows up at our door. And I'm so glad you mentioned the word fascism, because let's talk about Venezuela for a minute. Now, if you had not heard the news, we posted on our page, our friends and comrades were, I hate to use the word occupying, because they were not occupying the Venezuelan embassy here in the United States. They were invited to stay in the Venezuelan embassy by the representatives, by the diplomats of the democratically elected president and government of Venezuela.
Right.
That is the government of Nicolas Maduro. They were invited to stay. And they were invited to stay because they recognized over a month ago that the Trump administration was going to try to implement a military coup, to get rid of Maduro, and in the process of doing that, they were going to try to install their ambassadors at the embassy in Washington, D.C. So Trump illegally expelled the diplomats from the embassy. And the diplomats requested that the embassy collective, the Embassy Protection Collective, which they weren't called that then, they were just, a group of people who were activists all the time. Kevin Zeese, Margaret Flowers, a few other people, Kay Pritzker, a few other people whose names I can't remember right now. But they said that they would hold that space until a diplomatic resolution to this farce of an opposition movement was arrived at, and then they would leave when that diplomatic resolution was reached. A few days ago, somebody was out there in front of the embassy. Now, you've seen the live streams we did when we were out there and we were accosted and almost assaulted and insulted and surrounded by those right-wing white supremacist imperialists that were out there. Some of them, it turns out they were employees of the CIA and the IMF and, real shady, but they were real organized, but there were a bunch of violent thugs. You've seen the reports of how they were keeping food from going into the embassy to the people who were in the embassy. You saw when we were out there taking food. Now, we did a live stream. We were out there that Sunday after church, taking a truck full of food into our friends in the embassy. We were able to go in. We were able to go in like the week before and participate in a program. We were able to come and go. But the day that their white daddy Juan Guaido or Guaido, or however you pronounce that fake puppet interim president's name, the day he decided to try to
use the nuclear option
and implement a coup, a military coup now, tried to get the Venezuelan military to turn on Maduro and storm the presidential offices in Venezuela. That's the day those people came out, because they weren't out there before.
No.
For like a month almost before. They weren't there. So then all of a sudden, this violent, fascist, racist, sexist mob, they're out there calling people nigger. They're out there calling people mammy.
Yep.
They're out there calling people bitches. They calling people monkeys. And not just black folks. Because, see, we say that they're white supremacists because you have to understand that white supremacy is a serious underpinning of this resistance to the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela, because Hugo Chavez made it clear, and it was unequivocal, that he was not just a friend, but a loyal ally to Haiti and Africa and Afro-descended Venezuelans. He himself said, you see this nose? These were his words. And I think he was speaking it when he was visiting New York. And he was talking to somebody, giving an interview. And he said, you see this nose? You see this lips? I'm African. This is the African in me. So Venezuela, through the Bolivarian Revolution that Hugo Chavez ushered in, was providing assistance to Haiti. And Maduro continued doing that. The Bolivarian Revolution was a working people of color, Afro-Brazilian revolution that elevated people who were poor in Venezuela and oppressed by imperialist capitalism to a higher standard of living. The Maduro government just finished building 2.5 million units of free housing in Venezuela.
But but the thing of it is that when we talk about the Bolivarian Revolution, we have to understand that one of the biggest fears of the United States and of the West was, as they did during the communist era, when it was the domino effect. When the United States was in Southeast Asia and in the Korea, and they were just worried about all of these nations coming under being influenced by communism.
Right.
And the same thing was here. I mean, you in Bolivia, the Bolivarian Revolution actually took hold in Bolivia, where they elected the first indigenous president. And then it started, but all of these also is, if you want to really look at it, all of this goes back to the Cuban Revolution.
Yes.
So it was always on the part of the United States to stop the self-determination. And people seen how successful the Cuban Revolution was. In spite of the embargo, in spite of all of these things, the Cubans held out, and in my view, eventually won.
Yeah.
And then you can take the Cuban Revolution and take it all the way to Haiti.
Right.
And so we connect these dots from the Bolivarian Revolution to the Cuban Revolution, all the way to the Haitian Revolution, which was the first major revolution against colonialist imperialists that was actually successful.
Exactly. And truthfully, the Bolivarian Revolution and the Cuban Revolution, well, let me say it in historical order, in chronological order. The Cuban Revolution and the Bolivarian Revolution were inspired by the Haitian Revolution. And Chavez specifically said that. It's called the Bolivarian Revolution because of Simon Bolivar, an Afro-descended man. So that's a little bit of history to understand why this issue with Venezuela and the embassy and supporting the democratically elected leader of a people in another country is important to these black people. So what happened yesterday, the right wing racist, fascist mob was out there still keeping food from getting into the embassy, but Jesse Jackson shows up. And this is why Ajamu Baraka was here. Right. This is why he came into town. He went to the embassy, and he had been here before, and he had been down there before. Members of Black Alliance for Peace. It was Ajamu, our comrade and friend, Net for Freeman. I think Garrett Harris, Paul Pumphrey of Friends of the Congo. A bunch of other people went down there. And Jesse Jackson went down there. Now, look, you can talk about Jackson's politics all you want to, but that's not the point. Because here's what happened. Jesse Jackson goes down there with some backpacks full of food. And he makes a statement, and he tries to deliver the food. Now, one of these right-wing racist thugs tries to forcefully take the backpack, one of the backpacks, from Jesse Jackson. This is how little respect these people have for everybody.
And here's a man that, Jesse Jackson got to be about almost 80 years old.
You know, first of all, he's Jesse damn Jackson.
Right.
Secondly, he's 80-something years old. Yeah. And you are going to try to snatch some, you're going to violently accost that man? Then that's one part of what happened yesterday that's important. The other part of what happened yesterday, and you can go on Black Alliance for Peace's Facebook page to see this video. Ajamu Baraka, Paul Pumphrey, Net for Freeman are out there physically restraining these people to keep them from violently accosting the people who were trying to deliver the food. And what happened after that, at some point, Jesse Jackson said, listen, this is a serious situation. We cannot allow the United States imperialism to go on, whatever. He says, I am going to get members of the Rainbow Push Coalition and ministers around the country involved, and we're going to have people out here every day. Mm-hmm. Folks, let me tell you, that is one reason why the State Department had Secret Service police invade that embassy and arrest those people.
Well, I'm glad you used the term invade, because technically that's what it was. It was a U.S. invasion of Venezuela, because the U.S. any embassy is considered to be the soil of that country.
Right.
To have U.S. law enforcement go in there without the permission of the Venezuelan government, because they couldn't have got permission because Nicolas Maduro is still in charge. The Venezuelan government that they oppose is still calling the shots. So I'm sure that the State Department didn't call Maduro and say, look, we're going in there. They might have informed them in some way. I'm sure that, out of, some type of diplomatic courtesy, they say, well, look, we're going into the embassy and arrest those people, but not asking for the permission to do it. Right. It's just informing. So when you look at it, that still technically constitute an invasion of Venezuela by the United States. And that part hasn't really been highlighted. What has been highlighted is the arrest of the people that were on the side of justice, the Embassy Protection Collective, but not talking about the bigger implications of a U.S. actual technical U.S. invasion of Venezuela.
Right. That's an excellent point. And the reason they had to do it this way, they had to. There was no way that this administration was going to let black-ass Jesse Jackson and black-ass Ajamu Baraka and all these black-ass ministers and Rainbow Push Coalition members and all their friends and their Negro-loving friends show up in front of that embassy every day. Right. That was a PR nightmare that they did not, because see, the media has been blocking out, they have not been broadcasting the Maduro protests in Venezuela. And when you see them, when you go to telesur.net, telesurenglish.net, or you go to venezuelananalysis.com, you see a whole bunch of black people. You see way more black and brown folks in those protests in Venezuela for the government than we ever saw outside, those folks outside of the embassy. There's a reason for that. So that the State Department, this administration, could not let that happen. Here's the other reason. Today, Right before this invasion of the embassy happened, it was reported that representatives of the Guaido government, of the Maduro government, and the Guaido fake government are actually meeting in Norway to discuss a diplomatic resolution to this issue. Now, what was the demand? What were the conditions of the Embassy Protection Collective under which they would leave? If and when a diplomatic resolution to this issue in Venezuela was resolved. See, the State Department could not let any kind of agreement be reached and the Embassy Protection Collective voluntarily leave, because then the EPC would have won. Yeah, I mean, do you see what we're saying?
Yeah.
If so we're not talking about people who broke any laws. We're not talking about people who didn't understand what the situation was. We're not talking about people who didn't understand don't understand international law, don't know what the stakes are, and don't know. No, they were clear. And they told the law enforcement that tried to arrest them the other night, when they opened the door, they're like, listen, this is the sovereign soil of Venezuela. If you breach this soil, you are invading Venezuelan territory. We will leave under the condition of a diplomatic resolution to this standoff between the legitimately elected government of Nicolas Maduro and this opposition person, Juan Guaido. That's the condition under which we will leave. So the State Department, who's the Secretary of State?
Mike Pompeo. Yeah.
That punk Pillsbury Doughboy could not let those 4 peacenik activists, well, it was 4 by the time it was, yesterday, but there was no way they were going to let those little peacenik activists, those little lefty commie activists, because that's what all, they called them all kinds of names. There was no way they were going to let them win. And there was no way they were going to allow a bunch of black folk, especially black folk of faith, a bunch of good, upstanding, God-fearing Christian folk standing in front of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C., protesting against the United States government. They weren't going to have it. There was no way they were not going to arrest them today. It was shameful. It was a violation of international law. It was a violation of the Vienna Convention, and it was an invasion of Venezuela. The United States did carry out a sort of a coup, but understand why they did it. And that's what I think I want us to take away from this. We have much more power than we think we do. Being on social media is great. Because you wouldn't have known about any of this stuff if it wasn't for social media. But at some point, y'all, we got to get out in the streets. We have to get out in the streets and put the fear of the righteousness of God, whatever you think God is, into these people who are toying with our lives. And that's where I want to segue to the next story. Oh, by the way, our friends are being arraigned tomorrow.
Yeah.
At I can't remember where, but they're being arraigned tomorrow. They have not released the details. But Saturday, there is still a mobilization in front of the Venezuelan embassy, and we will be there as we had planned to be. Okay, so now moving on to the fear of a righteous God. What else we been doing this week?
Well, I mean, besides having we, at our own personal church, we've been having programs. I mean, we've been covering topics from, we had an addition put on to our church, and so we came around. Jackie and I are both part of the Board of Social Action, and our job as the Board of Social Action is what it says, to basically spearhead or basically connect the church to social activism, being a change of the church, not just sitting back and waiting for Jesus to come. I mean, it's actually going out there and actually try to make a better world, which is what, Jesus said, be the salt of the earth.
Right.
Well, being the salt of the earth means you got to go out there and do stuff. You got to sprinkle the salt and all this other kind of stuff. But being the salt never implied to me that, that it was a passive thing. So, so we took this and we had set up 2 weeks of activities for this grand reopening of this of our church, and not just a grand reopening of the physical building, but a recommitment to our social responsibility,
right?
Our social activism, social justice responsibility. So all of those imply. So we've had some very powerful people, activists who had came out and supported us, in spite of not many of us coming to support them. We had people like Miko Peled, and we had Maurice Cook, and we had
Phyllis Bennett,
and Dr. Rome Frazier.
Yep.
All of these people, man, that came out, that I've learned so much. Just sitting amongst these people, and we've had dynamic discussions and everything after that. But one of the things that we've seen is that the role of the church, and this is what the mission is, and we're not just saying as far as Christians, but what we're saying is people of faith. That what we see today is, again, this tendency among religious folk to say that this is not their fight,
right?
And this is not their fight, to go along with the prosperity, gospel, and all of this other kind of stuff, as opposed to a faith, a Christian faith, that has been turned into a very individualistic thing.
Right.
As opposed to your social responsibility to your neighbor and to what's going on. And that's all social activism is. Social activism is nothing spooky about it. What is my responsibility to the people I live around? That's right. And what is my responsibility to them? And so this is what religion has always taught. This is what and it's a shame that we as so-called progressives have such an adverse reaction to religion, because see, what happens is, what we fail to realize is that there are very different expressions of the faith tradition. Right. And what happens is, I get the same responses from everybody. Oh, well, the church is, the church is fascist, or the church is this, the church is, well, maybe the church that you know about. Right. But it really bothers me that those of us who don't like those of us who ourselves can't stand intolerance are intolerant to others. Right. And especially when it comes to the faith tradition. So what we're saying is the fact that what we tried to do with our own church is to basically recommit ourselves to a faith tradition that has always, especially with the Black church, has always been on the side of social activism. It had to be. Right. It was the only safe place we had. It had to be. So again, a lot of the Black church, and I hate to use those terms, but a lot of the church, the so-called Black church, has basically lost that mission. And so it turned into a lot of, how can God make you rich? Right. Right. And so that type of being the religious arm of capitalism, which is what a lot of the Joel Osteens and all them have become. It's all about not your responsibility to justice and social justice. It's about planting seeds in the ground and this and that and the other. And I don't mean to mock anyone's faith, but what I'm saying is that this is not what, if you follow Christ, if you follow, this is not what they were talking about. Jesus himself said that he didn't have that the foxes in them have holes. He didn't have anything. He didn't have anywhere to go. Yeah, right. So it wasn't so when we look at the revolutionary stance of religion and the revolutionary stance of the church, especially the Black church, this is what we were trying to and what we're not trying, but this is what we're recommitting ourselves to. Right. And the frustration that we have is that so many Black people, in particular, because I'm gonna get on the church and their bullshit in a minute.
because it's not like people don't have valid criticisms of things that so-called people of faith have done and are doing. Yes, those criticisms are valid. But here's the thing. If you come in contact with people of faith who are not that way, who don't have that disposition, who are doing the work for social and racial justice, and the reason they're doing it is because they see that is the mandate in their faith, then what's your problem? I don't understand how when we have someone, we are a Christian church that usually is all, the Christian church, their stance for most Christian churches is usually very, stand with Israel no matter what. Well, we're not. We're not, to the point that we have been for the past year having a year-long political education campaign on explaining to people in the church and in the community why what's going on in Palestine is important and why Israel is wrong.
And this is one thing that we can't forget. One of the reasons why the right is so successful in their policies and stuff is that they have not rejected people of faith. See,
they used them.
Right. But see, what progressives need to understand is that over 85% of people in this country claim some type of religion. 85% of them, now that don't mean they go to church every Sunday, but more than 85% of Americans identify with some faith. That means they're not atheists, they're not agnostics. That means that they identify with either of the major Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. And then you have other faiths in there. But this is not a faithless nation. And the right understood that, and they understand that. And they use that to their advantage. But here on the other side, we want everybody to be secularist humanists. That's just not the case in this country. So if we're going to attract people to the movement, you got to meet people where they are, not where you wish them to be. And that's the thing. So we have all of these churches that it's not just us. We have other churches and even mosques who are on the there's a mosque that partners with us.
Yeah.
That goes out and for social justice. But you wouldn't know those things if you just have a blanket rejection of people of faith. You wouldn't know that. So you have to meet people. We have to meet people where they are. We just can't sit back and be like, oh, I would love to hear that person talk, but it's in the church.
Right.
I mean, what are you, Satan? You know what I mean? But you gonna melt? You know what I mean? You can't enter a church. You know what I mean? You can't enter a masjid or a synagogue. You know, what's wrong with you? Then we need to question you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what's wrong with you. That you can't walk up into a church.
Yeah, we need to question you. So this is the thing that we have to understand is that we have to basically, have to be more tolerant than we give ourselves credit for. We're not as tolerant as I say that we should give us that we claim to be, and there's people out there who would be on our side, but we can't give them the attitude that we don't want them because somehow we think they're backwards because they believe in a God.
I love it. I love it when people like, oh, your imaginary sky god doesn't exist. Okay, but I'm willing to take my black ass down to the Venezuelan Embassy and protest because I believe that my imaginary sky god says it's the right thing to do. What you doing? What you doing? You sitting online telling me that I'm stupid because I believe in my imaginary sky god? Okay, so while you're doing that, at our church, we're having, like you said, Miko Peled talk from the pulpit about how there is a near genocide in Palestine right now. Here's a man who is an Israeli-born son of a general in the IDF.
That's right.
He wrote a book called about a general's son, and I can't remember the
journey. I'll find it.
Yeah, and then he wrote another book, and we'll give you the links to them like we always do.
But he also goes back and forth to Israel all the time.
All the time.
So this is not some old knowledge that he's spoon feeding us.
No, he lived under the myth of the Israel state. And the terroristic nature of the Palestinians, that they weren't a people. He lived under that myth, and then he lived through his awakening to see what was really true. And now he is an advocate. Well, not now, because he's been an advocate for Palestinians for a long time. But we live stream that. We live stream that talk. And we encourage you to go back and listen to it, because that man said those words in our church. And I don't know who I'm more angry at during this 2-week period. I don't know if I'm more angry at the people, some of the people in our church who didn't come out and support us, or if I'm more angry at the Black Christians that I went to church with in other churches who believe this myth about Israel, and we have to stand with Israel. Y'all, the blood of the Palestinian people is on the hands of a lot of American Christians. That's just true. And that's a whole nother show. We don't even have time to talk about that right now. But we also had Maurice Cook, who talked about gentrification and how the public education system in D.C. is screwing over poor Black kids, and his organization he started all by himself.
Why? Because he wasn't getting any support from nowhere else. He wasn't getting support, and he explains that we had put the live stream up there.
Live stream that one too.
He couldn't get any fun, and this is the case with Black activism. We say this all the time. This is the case with Black activism. I mean, not only do we do the work, but what we don't get is the resources.
Right.
And we don't get that. But we're like an hour into it. We said we weren't going to be long.
I know. Yeah, I know.
But what we don't get are the resources. I mean, and so and we say this all the time, is that in this world, everything, when it comes to something Black, you either want it cheap or free. I mean, it's the truth. When it comes to something Black, you might get some high profile people that might get a little extra money. But when it comes to Black folks in this world, you either want it cheap or you want it for nothing at all. Because our content is not really valued. And what we put on the table is not really valued. Now, we know that's not all you guys, but it's enough of you guys to keep us. It's enough people out. How can I put it? The situation is bad enough to the point where we're walking. You see, we're tired. That we're to the point where we pushes ourselves to the point where you got two middle-aged people who's pushing themselves to the point we're about ready to fall over.
Just pass out.
Yeah.
Because, we got a bunch of people who everybody's walking around calling themselves Christian, and they shouting up and down in the church. Now I'm talking about Black folks, y'all. They're shouting up and down in the church, talking about naming and claiming it, prosperity gospel, and they're dancing, and they still poor. They're still poor, and then they believe that they don't have to get involved in any of these issues because they belong to this ridiculous death cult that they call Christianity. That's not the Christianity we believe in, that all they have to do is pray, and this world is going to end, and they're going to get their mansion in heaven. That's a death cult, y'all. That's not the faith. That's not the Christian faith. That is a death cult. Then on the other side, you got the white people, the white conservative Christians who are passing laws to ban abortion, talking about they're pro-life, but the very same people don't want to expand social services, sex education, food benefits, housing benefits to take care of that life once they get here, because it's welfare.
Well, if you wanted to put it in terms of like a movie or something, they are the guardians of the uterus.
And that's the only thing that guardians of. That's the only thing.
That's what they think themselves as.
And unfortunately, that's what Christianity, that's the representation of Christianity in this country, because, like you said, the Republicans knew how to use people of faith. The Democrats, the only time they ever come and talk to, especially Black people of faith, is when they want us to vote for them.
Right,
Outside of that, they don't want to come and have political education or talk about legislation. They don't do that in our churches. That's why we do what we do. And here we are about to pass out from exhaustion from having these amazing speakers come to our church, and people won't even show up so we can have snacks. Get the heck out of here. Let's talk about Iran.
Well, just quickly with Iran. Well, look, we know that the United States is provoking Iran. They're provoking Iran into a war. I see a conflict coming. I think within the next couple of months. The United States, again, one thing about the U.S., they never update their playbook.
That's true.
They run. If it was a football team, they run the same plays. They run the same plays, straight ahead, straight ahead.
Take it up the middle.
Right. And so now you got this carrier task force that's in that's been told to go to Iran, Persian Gulf, and mind you, now it's very strange that this happened once the Israeli elections were already settled.
You notice?
You know what I mean? So now that you know the Israeli elections are already settled, it's like, okay, now you know we can be more provocative because Netanyahu wants this. You know, Trump wants it. You know the war hogs, Bolton, and they all want this. You know, and there's certain parts of Europe that's just, if they don't want it, they're not going to stop it. So they're going to go along because, you know, they're basically the bitches of the United States. So, you know, so they're going to sit around and go with whatever the United States does. So, so the U.S. once again, might makes right, and again, additional sanctions. Now we saw this played out on Al Jazeera, where the additional sanctions that the United States had put on. And we're going to tie this in, so try to bear with us because we're talking about the faith community along with current events. The United States is basically saying that Iran can't sell no more oil. Now think this now. They're saying our sanctions is so you don't sell any oil, and anybody who buys oil from you, we're sanctioning them too. If that ain't gangster.
Ooh, I see where you're going.
Right? So now we have, so if people of faith don't understand the importance of that, I don't know how many times I've sat up in churches and listened to Revelation and listened to preachers talk about, you know, how during the end days or whatever that you can't buy, sell, or trade.
Tribulation. The
tribulation is supposed to be this horrible period that you know humankind is going to go through, and you know where you have this government that basically just oppresses everybody else. So I mean, if that's the narrative, then I think we're in the tribulation. But the thing of it is that one of the characteristics of the whole system of sanctions is that you're not going to be able to buy, sell, and trade. That this government or that government, that oppressive government, you know, will make it that people won't be able to buy, sell, trade unless you you're on the side of that government or you do that government's bidding, right? So this is what we said. So I don't understand how you have preachers who claim to know, you know, the gospel, the Bible, and all this stuff, and yet they don't connect this to real world events. What I'm saying is the fact that is one of the reasons why the church is not politically engaged, because of what is being fed. It's being fed this docile pablum of, you know, of looking to the other side, you know, and you know, it's like you're letting your house burn down, but damn it to hell, the plans I got in my head for that house I'm going to build over there on that other side. Oh, that's going to be great. You know what I mean? That house ain't even built yet. But yeah, you sitting here letting your house burn down because, man, that next house is going to be beautiful. I'm at 3 bathrooms.
That's right. It's going to be a mansion. Right. It's going to be streets of gold.
Right. It's going to be a mansion and stuff. Meanwhile, the house that you're in is just burning all around. So, you know, so that thing, that doesn't make any sense. And the thing of it is that what that it is incumbent upon these preachers who see what's going on to connect your scripture to what is going on and politically activate your church. Make the word, make what you're preaching relevant to their own survival, what's happening right now.
Exactly. And listen, let's stop acting like that's an unprecedented thing. Because why do you think these abortion bills got passed? Because conservative white Christians did the exact same thing. These people have been playing chess for 40 years. Stop blaming this stuff on Trump. This is not Trump's fault. This has been the plan of the GOP using the conservative white Christian church for 40, 50 years. And here we are on the so-called left. We are so much more advanced that we don't need faith, that we won't even work with people in communities of faith who are out here doing the work, because we see the prophetic, the realization of these prophetic teachings in our faith. We see it in a real world way. We don't think the mark of the beast is some, 666 stamped on people's
It's not that
forehead.
Rosemary Baby stuff.
No, it's not some, they're going to put a chip under your skin so you can't sell and trade. No, it's sanctions. It's sanctions imposed by this imperialist government on other governments around the world that it wants to control. That's the mark of the beast.
Now, this is the problem. The fact that this last sanction, the United States went too far with the population of Iran, because we saw on Al Jazeera, that's what I was going to finish with, that the people are now starting to rally around the government
of Iran, right?
Because they see, because everybody loves their country. They might not like the leader in charge. I mean, we don't like Trump. But damn it, the hell, I think most of us will pick up a gun if another foreign nation comes in and want to invade us. I mean, they don't have to do nothing with Trump. But I think that we would defend our country in spite of Trump and Pompeo them if another foreign nation wanted to come in and do us harm. No, people are no different in other countries. People love their country just as much as we love ours. And so the people of Iran, people who we saw on Al Jazeera who said that, I never came out for a protest before, but I'm out here now because I think that the U.S. has went too far. Right. That's what they're saying. No, they might not like the mullahs. They might not like, the religious government they got, but they will defend it because it's their home. Remember Boardwalk Empire, season 3, when Gyp Rossetti took over the boardwalk, right? And when he went to the black part of Atlantic City, and he wanted to know why the black people was fighting him back, because he came out there and told Chalky White, who was the leader of the blacks in Atlantic City, and he said, "Look, me and you are practically paisan. I'm dark, I'm dark complected because he was Italian, right? And you're black from Africa, and and they still fought him. So then he couldn't understand that, and so he told one of the men. He said, "Well, why would they fight?" And he said, "No." He went to his boss, and Montserrat, and he told Montserrat. He said, "I don't understand why the black people would fight us." And he said, because it's their home. Right. Yeah. It might not treat them well, but this is their home. This is our home. So it's the same thing with over there in Iran. Yeah, they don't like the mullahs. They might not like what's going on and all this stuff, but it's their home. And people are not going to allow but so much abuse when it comes to where they lay their heads at night. So this is what's happening, is that the United States, I think, purposely want this. I don't think this is any miscalculation on the part of the United States that they put this last sanction on and seeing that the Iranian people are galvanizing around, because this gives them even more of an excuse to attack, because now there's no innocence. Right. And now, of course, there was the fake, the attack wasn't fake, but they blamed it on Iran, and it wasn't Iran that blew up the 2 or 3 tankers. Yeah, but see, but the Iranian foreign minister, who was I don't know if he was in India, he was somewhere, but he even said that we knew they were going to do this. Right. Because they don't change their playbook. Exactly. You know what I mean? They don't change their playbook. We've seen this in Libya. We've seen this in Syria. The barrel bombs and all this. We've Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin. Yeah, we've seen that. Oh, well, let's remember the Maine, going back to the Spanish-American War. That's right. This has always been something that the United States has always done in order to manufacture a crisis, only to go in there, use military force to get what they really want after. And all of it's after, folks. I know that it sounds cliched, but it's not. What is after is oil. What we said at the beginning of this show is that our lifestyle our lifestyle is unsustainable. But they're going to drain. They are going to try to sustain this bloated lifestyle of ours until it means the death of us all. Yep. So to wrap this all up, listen, those people who are behind and supportive of this imperialist nation, this imperialist warmongering government, not just this administration, but the whole government, the whole government for decades and decades, those people are united in their purpose and their cause. Even the Democrats. Excuse me. How many Democrats have you heard speak out against what happened at the embassy in Venezuela? No, none. I mean, maybe Bernie might have said something. I think, but who else? Of that, no. Who else? And none of them came down there. Not one. So these people who are pushing these kinds of imperialist warmongering actions in Venezuela, in Iran, in Haiti, we're doing stuff in Haiti you don't even know about. They don't even talk about it because it's black people. In Africa,
all over Africa. In Bolivia still, in Honduras, all over the place. These people have a playbook that they stick to. They're united. They don't have to agree with each other on everything, but they're going to get that money. That's their goal. That's the mark of the beast. That is the mark of the beast. But here we are, those of us who are supposed to be the resistance, those of us on the alleged left, we can't get along if somebody has a personal spiritual belief that you don't like. Somebody eats meat, you don't like it. You know, somebody has some type of personal thing that you can't get. Man,
or if you're the wrong gender.
Or if you're the wrong gender.
Because don't get me started on that one.
Look here.
You know, so, you know, yeah, if you're the wrong gender or whatever. I mean, we got, and you know, look, it's true. A house divided cannot stand. And it's true. And that's true in life. I mean, that's true in life. I mean, so you can't be victorious, man, if we got a bunch of divisions amongst us. It's just not going to happen.
So
we'll still be sitting in the classroom being the smartest kid in the class, but not going anywhere.
And we can't afford that. None of us can afford that anymore. None of us can. This ain't a sport. This ain't a spectator sport no more. This is not. Y'all can't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is why we do so much stuff, because we recognize this. But look, y'all ain't gonna kill us. We're not gonna kill ourselves trying to save y'all who don't want to do nothing. Wherever you are, whatever community you're in, do something. Do something. Sharing the videos are nice. You know, following Facebook pages, and that's wonderful. But you gotta get out in the streets, y'all. Because going back to the Venezuelan Embassy, they know how much power we have. That's why they had to shut that situation down before it got out of their control. Why don't we let this situation get out of control? Let us give them the lack of control they know they can't handle. Take to the streets, y'all. We have got to fight for our future. Ain't nobody else gonna save us but us.
That's right.
So we need to go eat dinner and go to sleep. And we'll be back. We'll probably live stream from church tomorrow night, because I'm so excited about this. We are so excited about this. How many churches have you heard having somebody up in their church talking about what's going on in the Congo? Man, we have Maurice Carney from Friends of the Congo coming to talk to our church about why Christians should care about the Congo. That's what we do. So we'll be live streaming that on our page tomorrow night around 7 o'clock. And we'll be out at the Venezuelan Embassy Saturday afternoon. We'll live stream that. And we're probably going to get some sleep Sunday, and we'll see y'all later.
Yep, so if you want to help us in all of this, see our Patreon account, GoFundMe, subscribe, get the notifications, all of the social media stuff that y'all know about, and help us in this work. Because as you see, you know, all of your popular social media personalities, we don't see them anywhere. And we be in a lot of places and we don't see them.
Where they at?
You know what I mean? So they too busy, doing what they do. But we're actually out there and there, you know, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whether it's raining, we try to do that and bring to y'all, Luqman Nation, we try to keep our ears to the ground. So
look, y'all, good night. Thank y'all for joining us. Be really good to each other. And as always, peace if you are willing to fight for it.